All right, I'm just doing a little video about how I make kombucha. I taught class this morning. It's Saturday. I haven't showered. I look gross, but whatever. This is when I'm doing it, so here's what we're doing. So basically, first step with kombucha, you are going to boil some water. I just boiled this, and it's sitting to the side now. And I am making a gallon of kombucha. And so the ratio with this will be different, but I'm adding a whole cup of sugar to my water that just boiled, and the water just needs to be hot enough so you can dissolve that sugar in there. And I know a cup of sugar seems like a lot, but in the fermentation process, a lot of this is going to dissolve off, so you're not going to be drinking that entire cup of sugar. So for a gallon of kombucha, you use 1 cup of sugar, and don't worry about the water ratio. Some people measure out the water at the beginning, but I know how big my container is, and I just fill it up here in a little bit. But I'm adding 8 tea bags, okay? Black tea, plain black tea. I just use really not fancy black tea. So I've gotten it from Aldi, I've gotten it from Payless. If you're really into this, you can get organic tea. I haven't really gotten to that point yet. Just keep in mind, tea does have caffeine in it, so you can use decaffeinated tea bags, but I think there has to be some regular tea bags for it to work correctly. I've never tried it with all decaf. So basically, you want to let these tea bags sit for about 10 minutes, I think. I've let them sit a lot longer because I've forgotten about it, and it's fine. So we're going to let these tea bags sit for 10 minutes, and then you're going to take them out and let this tea cool down, okay? So we'd want the tea to be nice and cool, because once you add your SCOBY, your mother, if the tea is still hot, it can kill it. Right, so we don't let that. So we're gonna let our tea sit here, and then we'll go on to the next. All right, so we have our cooled down tea. I've taken the tea bags out, obviously. I spared you that little step. But we are gonna transfer this to our jug. And like I said, I'm using a gallon jug. I started using like quart ball jars, but we are drinking so much, I switched over to gallons, and we're actually doing 2 gallons at a time right now. And so when you start, you want to make sure you have some starter liquid. So this is kombucha that I already have. Anywhere from around 1 to 2 cups. And this is going to help start the process. If you don't have starter kombucha, you can use white vinegar. And if you start with the white vinegar, your kombucha is probably going to taste a little more sour, probably for the first couple of rounds, which is fine. And then eventually that vinegary taste will go away. But you need that starter liquid, and then you're just going to add, try to do this without spilling, add your tea. All right. And here's when I said I don't really measure at the beginning, because at this point I can just fill my jar with the rest of the water. Okay, and I'm going to spare you that detail too, but I use reverse osmosis water. And an important thing about the water, if you buy spring water from the store, you won't need to do anything else. You can't just use tap water. Tap water has chlorine and fluoride and stuff that will kill the SCOBY and make it so it won't ferment. So if you have reverse osmosis water, you're going to have to add some extra, what we call colloidal minerals. And I didn't get that out. A little walk to my fridge here to show you what I have. This just, the reverse osmosis process takes out some of the good minerals you need for the SCOBY to do its work. And I've heard you can do it without this, but after a while, it won't work as well. So I got this at GNC. It's like 20 bucks, but I literally put in a tablespoon or 2, and I've made countless batches of kombucha with this. So I'm just gonna, just pretend like I added a couple tablespoons of this in there. And then you're gonna fill this up with water, okay? I try to get it as full as possible to get the most benefit. Okay, I'm gonna have to set my phone down so I can lift this heavy jar and not dump. So there's a nice picture of my my countertop as I transfer this back over. All right, sorry about that. This is unprofessional. And here is your SCOBY, which is basically, trying to remember what SCOBY stands for, but like symbiotic something of yeast and good bacteria. So basically this is what metabolizes the sugar and the caffeine in the tea, and it just sits there and it looks kind of gross, but that's what makes the fermentation happen. So you're just going to cover your jar, and just a note, you have to use glass. You can't use like a plastic jar because that won't work. It has to be glass. And I just take a paper towel, set it on top, and then secure it with a rubber band, put it in my pantry, and let this sit for 10 days or so. And you might want to play around with it a little bit. It depends on the weather. If it's hot, it's gonna ferment faster. If it's really cold, it'll take a little longer. If it's humid, it'll probably go faster. But just kind of play around with it. If it ends up being, for me, honestly, it usually ends up being 11, 12, 13 days sometimes, because I don't get around to it. It doesn't take a long time, but you know, sometimes life happens. Okay, so this kombucha has been sitting for about 10 to 12 days, just sitting in my pantry. And so I'm ready to do what's called the second ferment. So you're going to transfer this kombucha. I just keep old kombucha jars that I've gotten at the store, and this is a gallon, so usually I can fill up about 6 to 7 of these kombucha bottles with each gallon. So you figure at least $3 per kombucha at the store. That's $18, $21 you're saving for every batch you make, which is really cool. So basically, here's the SCOBY on top. And what I do is I take the SCOBY out. I'm trying to do this one-handed. But take the SCOBY out, and usually at this point is when you can split your SCOBY in half. Just kind of bloop. So then that's where you get a little extra SCOBY you can share with friends. So, and then I'll keep the bigger one to put back in. But here, what I do, just because I have one hand and it's hard to show you, but actually, I'm gonna grab a spoon here. You get a nice view of what's going on in my kitchen. But I stir up the kombucha just to kind of get all the sediment on the bottom, and you can see it's already getting carbonated, which is cool. So I just kind of stir it up, mix it up, and then I transfer this into like a 4-cup Pyrex, what do you call it, measuring cup, and then pour that into the bottles because it has a little spout. So, because pouring this directly into the bottles is a little tricky. So then after I fill up all these bottles, I put the caps on really tight, and then I just let these sit on the counter for a day or two. And you can drink it right away, but what the second ferment does is make it more carbonated, and a little more of the sugar is going to ferment off, so it's not as sugary. And it gets a little more carbonated. Now, if you've waited too long, like you've gone on vacation, or you just haven't had time to change your kombucha early enough, sometimes it gets a little sour. And if that happens, sometimes I just add a little bit of water to kind of get the sourness down. But that's the second ferment. Let it sit for a couple days, and then you can stick it in your fridge. And once you stick it in the fridge, it'll stop the fermentation process. And that's pretty much it. I like to add like lime juice or lemon juice, sometimes ginger. People can do fruit and stuff as well, but I usually keep it pretty simple with mine. Okay, a couple of things I forgot to mention in the video real quick, just that you should know. When you're transferring the liquid from the big gallon to the small bottles, make sure at that point you're saving a cup or two of liquid to use for your next batch. If you don't, then you'll be stuck using vinegar. All right, I've done that before where I've transferred it all and then like, oh shoot, I didn't save any. So you'll save it then. Don't use metal utensils to stir during this process. For some reason, the metal isn't a good mixture with everything that's happening. So try to use, I use wooden just to be safe. I got my big gallon container at Big Lots. It was like $6 or $7. So totally worth it for that. And if you want to do a kombucha slushy, which I just drank, you basically just stick your kombucha that's ready in the freezer for like an hour or two. And Silas loves kombucha, don't you, buddy? Mm-hmm. You do. He calls it bucha. He loves it. So it's really good for gut health. Yeah. Isn't he cute? Yeah, it's good for his gut health. And just another note on water. Spring water, don't have to do anything to. If you get distilled water, you'll have to add those extra minerals, just like if you have reverse osmosis water or distilled water. Don't use tap water. That's probably the trickiest part, is trying to figure out, you know, which water to use. But if you get a gallon of spring water at the store, you know, it's pretty cheap. So hope this helps, guys. I know I look gross and nasty, but hey, this is me most of the time. So hope it helps.